to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
I am the aforementioned Brad, and this is the aforementioned John. Good morning, John.
Good morning to you, Brad.
We together do this show live every Monday through Friday, 7 to 8 o'clock a.m. Central Daylight Time now. And the reason I say this is because a lot of people listen to this show into the future on our podcast, bjshow.co, and John's still upset with me. It used to be bjshow.video. It's now bjshow.us. That is where you can go to the the YouTube version of the show, and John does a masterful job with time-stamping the whole recording so you can go in and quickly find the stuff you want. Now, John, I got a bunch of things to talk to you about today, but first off, we have to do the most important thing of this show. We have to bring in this guy. Sir, please identify yourself.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And why do you come along?
Now on with the countdown.
And we start the show off with the top 3 items from johncombest.com, an amazing website that's been in business for 23 years now? Is that right? 23 plus years?
Something like that.
23 years. He never misses a day. He synopsizes. He's sort of like the Missouri version of the Drudge Report. Lots of good stuff there. Lots of links to important stuff you should know about. What we start the show off with.
In third place,
the Missouri legislature. Back in Jefferson City yesterday. And to steal a cliche, to see where you're going, sometimes it helps to see where you've been. And that's what the Missouri Times did. Specifically, Jake Kroesen of the Missouri Times looked back at the 2025 legislative session and picked the winners. Not everybody can be a winner in the game of life, Brad, but Jake chose some folks and some groups that were winners in the 2025 legislative session. I'll just highlight 2 today because they're folks from our listening area. The first one is Senator Adam Schnelting. You'll recall, Brad, a year ago, he defeated Phil Cristofanelli in a heated Republican primary. And a lot of folks, Brad, I'll even put myself in this category. I'll take the heat for this. I thought Adam Schnelting would have had a quiet first year and not really done much in the Missouri Senate. But here's what Jake says about Adam Schnelting's year. He knew the pro-life IP, that's initiative petition bill, needed, Brad, in the original Amendment 3, there was a lot of speculation about whether it would enable transgender operation surgeries, whatever. We won't delve too far into that. But Jake's words are, he knew the pro-life IP needed the trans language in order to put it in the best position to pass. He held firm in the face of several enticing deals and got his IP with his preferred language to the ballot. So in other words, Brad, you have a freshman senator who's able to push a major piece of legislation through in his very first year. The second name from our listening area, Senator Nick Schroer. I'll read what Jake wrote. He could have come to the 2025 General Assembly to whine and lurch for attention or to get things done. Senator Schroer chose the latter and was one of the key elements of the 4 months and 4 days of making the Senate work again. Many predicted that his approach would set the tone for the session, and he brought his A game, and so did the Senate. So 2 folks from St. Charles County, Brad, really bold proclamations by Jake here, setting them among the couple handfuls of winners in the legislative session.
But Adam Schnelting did not get his landmark legislation passed.
And what was that, Brad? Remind us, it has to do with the way that you and Shelley Barr drive on a highway.
Not me, but Shelley. There's already a law that states that on the Missouri interstates, keep right except to pass. You've seen those signs before, John? Have you ever seen those in the interstates?
I have seen them before,
yes,
yeah.
They're on the interstate. He tried to propose a bill that if you were doing 120 in the left lane on I-70 headed west for the Kingdom City exit, and Adam Schnelting came up behind you, flashing his lights, doing 130, that he could do a citizen's arrest on you and put you in jail for 10 years because you were in that left lane because he had to get down to Jefferson City. He had important business to do. And how dare you do 120 miles an hour in that left lane when he's doing 130? That was his legislation.
I think it was 100 years in jail. And when you're pulled over on the side of the road because you're Brad Hildebrand, a Brad would drive by and call 911 and say something was wrong.
John would...
And they'd say, there's Mr. Hildebrand again, clogging up our time. I bet he's going to tell us about the P-51 Magnum.
Mustang. John would drive by
Whatever
and
the
go,
heck it's called.
oh, that poor sap. If he lived in West County like I did and drove a nice car, he wouldn't be broke down on the side of the road.
That's exactly right.
Right. That's what John. Okay, we done with number 3?
We sure are.
And hold it. You mentioned, just let me recap. Adam Schnelting, and were you talking about Ricky Schroer? Was that who were you talking about? The other person?
Yeah, a.k.a. Nick Schroer, senator from Defiance, Missouri. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out here, Brad, too, that as the legislature goes back into session, on TWMP Daily, that's the show put together by Scott Fawn, Jake Kroesen, Kelton Turner, they had the governor of the state of Missouri in studio yesterday. I have a link up today, Brad. 30-plus minutes with Governor Kehoe talking about his pitch for the stadium's plan, talking about crime in St. Louis City, what that means for businesses, what it means for the entire state of Missouri, talking about tax cuts. Scott pressed him on tax cuts, says we've gone from 6% to 4%, and we haven't seen a benefit in revenue. Why do we even cut taxes anymore, Governor Kehoe? Scott pushed him on some stuff. Where else, Brad, and I mean this seriously, where else are you going to see the governor of the state of Missouri doing a 30-minute interview at the beginning of a special legislative session?
And by the way, I don't know if you know this or not, there's a new reality TV show that's going to hit the network here real quick.
Oh, what is it called? Brad Pays as Debtors?
No, it's called Sleeping in the Old Lady's Basement. And matter of fact, what it is, it's a show about state legislators who decide that they don't want to live with their family. They're going to sleep in an elderly woman's basement because of the fact that they feel that that's a better place to be.
Oh, and because they want the best outcome for their children and their children's school?
No, it has nothing
to do
with...
They abide by ridiculous Missouri residency laws, and then they go to the voters and say, hey, do you want me to represent you in the state Senate? And voters say, yes, we do, Mr. Schroer. Is that the show you're talking about, Brad?
The only problem was the voters that say, yes, we want you to represent us, were in Kansas City. And that everybody's like scratching their head going like, okay, because as John just said, ridiculous residency rules. I mean, like if you live in Cape Girardeau, I think you should be able to be the state senator for Kansas City or Jefferson City. Don't you think, John?
Yeah, why wouldn't you, Brad? You are all over the map today. Did you put something special in your Mountain Dew?
I ran out of Mountain Dew, and I'm drinking my muscle milk this morning, to be honest with you. Okay.
Wow, you drink muscle milk?
I love it. Yes, I do.
Wow. Was belly fat milk not available at Schnucks?
It was, but it wasn't on sale. Okay.
You know who doesn't have a lot of belly fat? Subject to story number 2.
Oh, I just hit the button. I have to hit it again. You talked over Casey. Shame on you.
Up a notch to number 2.
Now you can talk.
Brad, a long simmering dispute that we talked about since we started the show in 2023. It's the Missouri Freedom Caucus versus what you would consider mainline Republicans. Now, as Jake Kroesen masterfully pointed out in his winners segment, in his winners column, we didn't hear a lot of battles in the Missouri Senate this year. Some would attribute that to the fact that Bill Eigel wasn't there anymore. Bill Eigel was running for governor, of course, in 2024, was the source of a number of disputes. But we didn't hear about the Freedom Caucus, quote unquote, causing trouble with mainline Republicans much. But that doesn't mean that there weren't any battles. No, it came out yesterday, and I'll point to 2 different stories, one from Rudy Keller of the Missouri Independent, one from Kurt Erickson of the Post-Dispatch, that Secretary of State Denny Hoskins had to cut jobs in his Secretary of State's office. You say, John, what the heck does that have to do with the legislative session? Well, you'll recall that Denny Hoskins was a proud member of the Freedom Caucus as a member of the Missouri Senate, and he often clashed with a gentleman named Mike Searpoy. Mike Searpoy is a state senator from the western side of the state. And in fact, what this has come down to, Brad, is that the state Senate this year essentially looked at Secretary of State Hoskins' budget and said, Denny, you used to complain about the fact that there were unfilled jobs in state government. And you used to say, hey, if those jobs haven't been filled for a while, Why do we even have those jobs? Why don't we eliminate funding? So guess what, Denny? We're going to do the same thing to you. Now, there's a dispute, Brad, and I think Rudy Keller does a really good job of describing this in his Missouri Independent piece. There's a dispute whether Denny Hoskins could have used a little bit of flexing. And I don't mean what you do at the pool in the summer, Brad. I mean, he could have taken a little bit of money from one part of his budget and saved employees from these job cuts. Denny Hoskins' office, for what it's worth, Rachel Dunn, his spokeswoman, says, nope, it doesn't work like that. These jobs were very specifically had to be eliminated. They were full-time employees that had to be eliminated. Some other folks say that Denny could have moved some money around and maybe saved a few of the jobs. But what this comes down to, Brad, is that long-standing battle between the Freedom Caucus and so-called mainline Republicans is still simmering. And in fact, it comes to a head when you look at Denny Hoskins' budget. What I thought was a pretty insightful quote here comes from Ben Brown. You know, he's the state senator from Franklin County, specifically from Washington. And he was asked by Kurt Erickson about what happened here. He said that this is a battle of the grudges. This is a standing dispute of the grudges that were between the Freedom Caucus and other Republicans. Ben Brown used the word retribution. And here's his quote to Kurt Erickson. It comes off as perhaps a bit of pettiness. I certainly hope this is something that can be rectified. So forgive me for going on and rambling there, Brad. But again, this is a curious case of a battle that took place in past years in the state Senate. Now that Denny Hoskins was successful and was elected Secretary of State, you still see maybe some hard feelings between Senate Republicans and Denny.
Isn't Ben Brown the former MMA guy? Am I getting him mixed up with somebody?
I think Ben Brown says that he used to do mixed martial arts training, yeah.
Right. Why don't they just put up like an octagon in Jefferson City and just get it all done with? You know what I'm saying?
I think that would be uncivilized. That would be like Democrats having a skirmish in the last weeks of the Missouri session that came to pushing and shoving, allegedly, Brad. I don't think Republicans do that.
What's wrong with pushing to shoving? Come on.
Brad, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't do it to you because look at your hip. I mean, among other things.
You're always so kind of me.
No,
John.
but let's go back to this real quick. I think Ben Brown does a good job here of encapsulating. You know, I think Ben Brown is probably a relatively good, let's keep that MMA analogy, Brad, probably a pretty good referee here because he hasn't necessarily put on the jersey of either side. I think he's identified as voting quite conservatively, but it's not like he's a member of the Freedom Caucus. So, yeah, from an outsider's perspective, Brad, not knowing everything that goes on in Jeff City, I think that this looks like a little bit of retribution against Denny's office, and it looks like full-time employees are paying the brunt of it.
You know, we need to create some new caucuses in Jefferson City. That's what we need.
Oh, what do we need, Brad? What would you suggest if you were down there?
The Weirdo Caucus, because that way all the Republicans can join that one.
And no Democrats?
No Democrats. Just the.
Come on. You don't think Democrats are weirdos?
No.
I think you could probably get
just the
on
Republicans.
any given day 163 House members to join the Weirdo Caucus.
You don't think the Republicans are weirdos?
No more than the Democrats, that's for sure. I think there's plenty of weirdos in Jeff City. Yeah, Brad.
And by the way, I got a text from your buddy Niles last night, and we need to discuss that in the B block, okay?
Oh, yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay. And last but not least,
the number one.
Down in Springfield Way, an interview with U.S. Congressman Eric Burlison. It's on KSGF, that's Springfield's radio station down there, Mornings with Nick Reed. And it's a baseball analogy. And I'm going to put you on the spot, Brad, because you formerly coached your son's baseball teams. You were also an umpire. Let's say, Brad, you're the manager of a team, and your team at one point in a game is down 37 runs. This analogy is courtesy of Eric Burlison, by the way. Your team is down 37 runs, and you see at the beginning of an inning that your team's about to hit, and the third baseman's playing back a little bit. And you got a Vince Coleman type up at bat, Brad, a little speedster up there. Do you lay down a bunt that the other team is taking you? Do you take that bunt, get on first base and see what you can do? Or do you just let get pride in the way and say, No, I'm going to tell Vince Coleman to swing away and swing for the fences. What do you do, Brad Hildebrand?
You turn on the automatic tarp, and it grabs Vince Coleman by the leg and almost breaks his leg. That's what you do.
Too soon, Brad. Too soon. It's only been, 28 years since that happened? A little too soon for me. But here's the point. I guess that'd be 38 years. Gosh, I'm getting old. Eric Burlison made the baseball reference, Brad. And he was talking specifically about Trump's one big, beautiful bill. And the analogy that Congressman Burlison was making is that, no, there's not everything in this bill that you want. Burlison's specific qualm, I guess, was that, yeah, there's tax cuts and Republicans talk about cutting taxes all the time, but we have to get the other side of the ledger straightened out. We have to get that spending under control. Burlison's analogy here is, no, there's not enough spending cuts in this, but we're going to take what we can get. And he detailed with Nick Reed the negotiations in the last few weeks before the bill came to a vote and what the U.S. House Freedom Caucus was able to get in terms of concessions about spending. So you hear this from Congressman Burlison quite a bit. He hammers home the point that you can't just cut revenue, right? You can't just keep cutting taxes without cutting spending. So I thought it was a unique analogy for him to make. I happen to agree with Congressman Burlison there. And, you're not going to get all the cuts to these government programs that you want in one big swath. So take a victory where you can get it, come back the next year, and hope that you can get more.
John, there's something that we talked about last week, and I heard Mark Cox talking about it this morning. Yes, I listen to other radio stations. And we briefly mentioned the fact that who were the Iron Maiden ladies on Tracy's station? What's the name of that show?
You said Iron Maiden. The Shield Maidens, that would be Stacey Shore and Lisa Panette.
Okay, remember they were discussing this thing where some big dude in Jefferson City, like the head of all the, I don't know what the job would be, but he's head of all the assessors in the entire state. And all these counties have signed on to this MOU, this say what is an MOU?
Memorandum of Understanding.
There you go. Thank you very much.
You didn't talk about this on the show, so this is the first time you've heard of it. You talked about the legislator pay, but you haven't talked about this.
About the automatic 15% increase in property taxes every year, because that supposedly is in the state constitution or something like that. Do you know about this?
No, I don't know that.
Well, that's been, and Mark Cox talked about it this morning, and he said that the assessors of St. Louis County, St. Louis, I believe Franklin County, Warren County, St. Charles County, all the collar counties, the assessors have all signed on to this, which means that, and I think they can only isn't the reassessment every 2 years in the state of Missouri? Isn't that the way it works?
I think it is, yeah.
Okay, so they could automatically give everybody a 15% increase every 2 years. Whether or not, and perfect example, let's say you were in St. Louis County and the tornado hit your house and your house is now decimated and the assessor just says, well, we're just going to give you another 15% increase. And you go, well, hey, I don't have a house anymore. Well, too bad the state says we can give you a 15% increase. We're just going to give you 15% increase. So you don't know anything about this then, huh?
No, and I'm guessing that doesn't every county have a process by which you can protest the assessment?
Yes, but the problem with that is, and it's interesting you should mention that, that process is sort of akin to what's that guy's name?
You're gonna make a gas tax reference, okay? Yes. But don't people successfully go in and say, "Hey, look, the assessment is wrong, and here's why," and successfully make that case?
John, I will tell you about a piece of property, a crazy little weird piece of property that I've owned for years. Okay, it's too small. You can't build anything on it. It's in St. Louis County. Okay, my assessed valuation on it for years was like, I don't know, $1,500. Then one year it went to $4,500. Then another year, a couple years later, went to $9,000. And then the next assessment was $28,000. Okay, I protested it. And let me tell you something. I think I would have enjoyed sticking bamboo shoots underneath my fingernails rather than go through this, because they're making so difficult to do. It's like the same crazy thing right now with the seniors with the property tax freeze. I have friends of mine, Kyle, a lot of senior friends. I have friends of mine who've told me horror stories about trying to get, matter of fact, in segment B, I will tell you a story about someone that I know that told me this story that I thought to myself, This is a Brad story because it's not believable. If I told the story on the air, John would go, I don't believe that, Brad. That never happened. That's what John would say. And this person told me the story. I thought to myself, there's no way that's true. Well, you know what? I did some research on it, and it's true. Let's start off the B block with that, okay?
That sounds great.